Mike Supple, everyone.
All right. I heard the clicker was hiding somewhere up in this direction, but perfect. Thank you. And don't worry, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and my hair is going fast. All right. Excellent. So I wanted to start talking a little bit before we get into the slides, just sort of change our mindset and our frame of where we are a little bit. So I want to first start by how many people in this room use their mobile phone as their alarm clock to wake up this morning? Anybody? All right, excellent. How many of you, within about 15 minutes of waking up, use that phone again to check your email, to read some articles, check Instagram, check Facebook? Yeah, exactly. Now, how many of you, within 15 minutes, got out of bed, turned on your desktop or laptop, and started doing some heavy internet browsing on a big old machine? Perfect. Yeah. So that's the mindset we want to go into with mobile on steroids, is the fact that mobile isn't the afterthought. Mobile is the first thought, and in many cases, the only thought. So we need to take that lesson into everything that we do as marketers. If we look at some stats this came from a similar web for United States browsing for the last couple of years, we can see in 2016, internet use crossed the 50% threshold for mobile versus desktop. In 2017, almost 2/3 of all of our internet use is happening on mobile devices. So this isn't a trend, it's a business requirement. You need to make sure that when you start thinking about how you're going to reach and interact and engage with your consumers and connect with them, you start thinking mobile. And then once you have that solved, get back and you can connect with them on the desktop side. So what does that mean for the digital world, though? How are we doing this? Well, a big thing that everybody's been talking about, and a lot of people got very worried about, was when Google started talking about mobile-first indexing. They started saying, well, we're going to look at your mobile content first, and that's going to be what we're using in our index. So that raised a lot of questions of what does it impact, why do they do it? Let's start a little bit with the why. Think from the user's perspective. Before mobile became so ubiquitous, people started building mobile sites. They had separate mobile sites. There was often a lot less content on there. And so if Google is indexing your desktop site as your primary index, and so they have all this, you've got all this great rich content on your desktop site. A user searches for something related to you. They see his search results. Your site pops up there with a little snippet. And they click through on their mobile phone. But that content was only on your desktop. All of a sudden, they're now on a page that has nothing to do with anything they were searching about and doesn't answer any of their questions whatsoever. From that standpoint, since Google is seeing more than half of their users are using mobile, they are doing their users and all of us a disservice by providing desktop data as the default response. So from a high-level standpoint, why mobile first? We need to meet that user experience, and that's what Google's trying to do. So in 2018, mobile-first indexing, they're making sure that if the first thing that people are going to see is your mobile content, then that is the content that's also represented on the search results, so that you're providing that great experience when users click through, touch through, and get into your devices there. So there have been a bunch of questions about that. Obviously, I don't work for Google, but people ask us all these questions all the time. So Google Webmaster did a couple quick Q&As on Twitter recently, so I pulled a few key gems out of there. People have a lot of questions about URLs. If I have mobile and a desktop site, what URL is going to show up in the search results now with mobile-first indexing? The key for that is Google is using the mobile content to do the index, but they are still recognizing if you have separate desktop and mobile sites. And so if a user is searching on a mobile device, you have a unique mobile URL, that's what they're going to serve so that they still pass through the mobile to the mobile URL. If they're on desktop and you have a desktop, then they will provide that desktop URL in the search results. So mobile-first indexing doesn't mean that your URLs are lost from there. They're showing up based on the right device. But on requirements, is mobile-first a requirement for you to be mobile-friendly, or sorry, is mobile friendliness a requirement for you to be part of the mobile-first indexing? The answer to that is no. Mobile-first indexing means they're looking at your content, and it's about what they know about you as an entity, what they crawl and browse and see about you. But that doesn't impact if you don't have a responsive site, you don't have a full latest technology, that doesn't mean you're going to be left out of Google's index now. They were still indexing and ranking that content. But as I say, that being said, if you don't have sites if you only have a desktop site that isn't easy to use from a mobile standpoint, you probably want to start thinking about that and making sure you're bringing that up to speed. It doesn't leave you out, but it might not give a good user experience, so you're not going to necessarily have that great business anymore with your customers. And does the mobile first index change ranking? So the official answer to that is no. Ranking isn't changed by how they're doing the mobile-first indexing. The key, though, is if they're looking at your mobile content, then you can only rank for the content that you have. And so if you have a very thin mobile site, that will change your ranking by virtue of the fact that you don't have content anymore to rank for. So the rules around ranking aren't impacted by mobile-first indexing, but as it has always been, you can only rank for the things that you have content for. So bear that in mind, making sure that your mobile content is there and ready. So before we move on to where we're going next with mobile, I want to step back for a second to see where we've come from. So late 90s, early 2000s, we had WAP, which was wireless application protocol. It was a standardization, an attempt at standardization by companies like Nokia and a few others to how we could present content from the web to mobile users. Of course, we had flip phones and other things, and even less at that time. What we called the Motorola brick wasn't a whole lot they could display, so we needed to have ways to simplify that information and get it out. So that's what this was, essentially straight text, small things that you could. So still on your phone, you could access the internet. But then, approaching later toward 2010 or so, I think BlackBerry started to arrive, which unfortunately disappeared. I loved my first BlackBerry, but then iPhone came in, and those phones started actually supporting full HTML. And so those phones would start displaying desktop sites. Now, of course, massive desktop sites, tiny little BlackBerry phone screen, there's a lot of pinching and zooming. You had to touch and zoom and weigh in and see what anything was going on. Again, not a great user experience, but a little bit better than straight text from the WAP protocol. And then people realized, okay, well, if phones and digital devices are supporting this, maybe we should start creating separate sites for that. So the idea of the M. site came on, my m.brand.com or mobile. You have a separate site built entirely for mobile devices, thinking, well, I'm going to have a couple large pictures and things so people don't have to pinch and zoom. I'll still get them some of the basic information, but most of my content and site's still going to really live on my desktop site where everything happens. So then the next phase, though, as devices got more and more ubiquitous, got better at rendering things, and as people started using mobile more, we had to move into that next step, which is responsive, making sure that I have a rich content experience regardless of how the user is interacting or finding me or getting in touch with me. So that's our responsive web came along there, having a common content. Doesn't matter what phone you have, what device, tablets, desktops, TV browsing, all of that, the content adjusts. And so that's kind of how where we've come in the last decade or so. So now that we have that, the device needs are met sort of by the technology needs and the coding needs, we can actually give rich experiences to people. The question is, where do we go next? But before we go next, we kind of have to make sure that we do have that core hit now of what is responsive mobile, and are we doing the technology right? Are we providing that great experience? And so it's important to think at the core, you want to reach your user. So however they interact with you, give them that right content. So responsive mobile means that your desktop, your tablet, your television browsing content, they're not separate entities. You have a core code base, a core content base. And when I say content here, I also often think content is that paragraph in the middle of that page where I say this is what I do or this is what I sell. But from a search standpoint, a crawling standpoint, content is a lot more on that. You have your meta information telling you the search engines things about your meta tags and titles and descriptions. You have your schema and your structured data that we talk a lot about. You have the alt tags and captions on your images. Those elements all have to be there in your responsive design as well. So if Google and the other browsers are crawling from a mobile-first standpoint, they still see all of that. If you have all this great rich content and imagery on your mobile site, but you don't have schema on your mobile site, then you won't be ranking for all these extra great things, the menus and the events and everything that people have been talking about up here. That needs to be accessible from the mobile side too, so that you're really a part of that and enabling users to find you and find your great content. So where do we go next? We're responsive mobile. We have the technology down. We can meet people where we need them. Now we need to engage and interact with them. We can't just put content on there and assume it's going to meet their needs and they're going to interact with us. We have to go out and proactively interact and engage and reach our consumers. So to do that, you have to create strong content. You need content in a way that will connect with your consumers and make them want to engage with you. You want to think about providing not just a web browsing experience, but more app-like in functionality. What can you do to drive those interactions? Unfortunately, there's a couple of technologies that help with that. We'll talk a little bit more. So PWAs, Progressive Web Apps, can take your existing site structure and give that a much more app-like experience, create those rich engagement experiences. Given that people are accessing your content from all over the world and all different device types and all different internet speeds and things, you need to think about how heavy is my site? How quickly can this load? Does somebody have to sit there for 5 minutes waiting for this video, or can it render quickly? And we have technologies like AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. which takes this heavier content and makes it much more lightweight. Google pre-caches it on their servers so it can be delivered in a lightning-fast way with still robust dynamic multimedia experiences. So thinking from that first point, engagement-centric mobile design. You need to really think about who your consumers are. Who are you trying to reach? What are their core personas? And what is going to resonate best with them? And put that in a way that will display and reach them first. And so, again, this is where the responsive design comes in. Different devices may show things a little bit differently. The content's the same, but it can move around and reach the users. So you put imagery up in certain areas on some devices, and the text can be in another area somewhere else. But you put that, so when that user is browsing and accessing it, they see the things that they can interact with or sort of get rich feeling from right away on that device. So a lot of rich imagery, especially on mobile, to introduce them into things. And then walk them through your product, though. Don't just say, here's some stuff and here I'm going to talk about it. Think about how you lay that out and how you can lead people into discovering and wanting to discover more about you. And once you've driven them into that point where they care and they're interacting, they want to know more about what you have, make it easy for them to convert. Big, bold, easy ways to know how do they take the next step to interact with you from a hotel standpoint. Easy to book and click and change dates and go around and make sure that's very clean and simple so that they don't feel they have to go back to a desktop to complete that, because maybe they will, maybe they won't. So talking about engagement with mobile, obviously people think a lot about apps, because on your mobile phones, most of the time we spend on our apps. But the challenge of the mobile dilemma is we want a mobile app because they have much higher engagement than a standard website. But the average user downloads 0 new apps per month. And the average user spends 80% of their time on their phone in their top 5 apps. So how do you get an app-like experience given that I might make an app and no one's going to download it? Even if they download it, is anyone going to use it? So that's where you look to newer technologies like PWA, Progressive Web App. What it does is it's adding more code to your existing site, but that then can turn your site into more of an app-like personality. It gives it newer features. And there are 2 core pieces of PWAs. The first is that it's installable. So users can download that to their devices, puts a little icon on your home screen just like an app would. It can cache the information all on your phone so the user can browse it offline. If they open up that screen, it doesn't open in a Safari or Chrome browser. It opens up just as its own, as a standalone. It looks and feels like an app. So you can get deployed on the screen, taking your existing site, your existing content without having to create a whole new app. So there's your PWA. The second core piece of that is push notifications. So that's a big piece about apps and driving engagements, is that I'm sure you all get way too many of these on your screen as little notifications that pop up all day, every day of all the things you have, things that are going on. You don't have to have an app for that. PWA supports push notifications with a caveat. At the moment, push notifications are supported by Android and on desktop devices. iOS supports the download and install functionality, so you can still install phones and have the offline browsing and full features. At the moment, iOS had originally said they were going to support push notifications in an older OS, 11.3. They had to pull back due to some buggy issues. They haven't come out and stated explicitly when they're going to release it. So a thing to note is you can still give that downloadable experience. Apple's still sort of playing catch-up on that with the push notifications. But given that you can still reach a lot of users on Android devices, a lot of users on their desktop devices, it's a great way to reach and interact and engage with consumers. And you need to think, though, about, as a consumer, do you look at every notification that pops up on your screen? Probably not. If you see the same app popping things up all the time that aren't relevant to you, do you deny the permission and just block those entirely? Absolutely you do. So when you're putting together a notification campaign, you want to think about, is this personal? Am I reaching out to users and making them feel like people? Is this timely? Is there a reason they should try to be interacting with this and clicking on this now? And is there an action that I'm asking them to take that I can actually measure and build and bring them into something? It doesn't have to be buying something, but giving them something to do to feel more connected to what you do as a brand. And when you do this, when you put together the install base functionality of engaging users and notifying them about things that are timely and sensitive and relevant to them, you can get some great results. We had ran with Riviera Maya. They ran a campaign around Black Friday showing a special they had just around the Thanksgiving holiday. And what we saw from that with the notifications is that users that enabled the PWA sessions versus users that didn't enable that PWA had a 57% higher conversion rate. They're 57% more likely to go from that content and click into that booking engine. So these are users that you're able to reach and engage and drive them into your funnel and give them a reason to want to interact and connect with you and really give that higher shift down into what you do as a core business. So that's the web or app-like functionality piece. Let's talk a little bit about AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. The project driven by Google, but is open to everybody. Again, Google is definitely trying to drive more usage out of this. One of the reasons, or what the core of what it is AMP is a library that enables you to build friendly sites and that are very user-friendly and very fast. It's a lot of different components that many other developers have worked on that give rich, robust experiences. When AMP was first released a little over a year ago, it was a little stripped down, a little bare bones. You couldn't create rich experiences, but there's been a lot of resources dedicated into it. As of last April, there are over 6.3 billion pages that have been built in AMP. 90 pages were being built per second in AMP. This is as of April. I'm assuming things have only accelerated since then. So people are really embracing this, and there's a lot of great things you can do with AMP. But the core, why does it matter to you and your users? You could have multimedia experiences, videos, imagery, all kinds of anything you need to do with interactivity, and it's fast and pre-cached, so it loads immediately on browsers. So what I like most about AMP, though, is that it enables different thinking and ways to drive people through your site and through your content. So rather than, there's a section of AMP called AMP Stories. And these are things that you can put together a predefined set of multimedia things to tell a story about what it is that you are doing, what you offer, about your property. The core of how an AMP story works, there's a cover page. Users can tap and swipe to navigate back and forth through it. You have your core content story pages, which include music and videos and imagery and text and all those things, and all great moving graphics. Everything moves around. And then you have the conclusion, which by default includes a lot of sharing and linkability, easy to share out to social networks, easy to copy and share and paste links. So that's your core functionality of an AMP story. The way it works is it's a concept on your phone. Imagine you're landing on a home page. User can scroll and click and go through whatever they want. Or if they land on your AMP story, you can drive them through the experience exactly the way that you want to show it to them. Share what pieces of things are going to resonate with those users really well, what parts of your content, what imagery, what things are going to evoke emotion and passion about what it is that you do and connect with those lives. And of course, this extends into every industry, well beyond hospitality. You need to think, how do you connect into your consumer's life or your consumer's life cycle? So again, maybe think from the automotive standpoint. How does your product mesh and grow with someone's life, and how do you become an ingrained piece of their life? They get a new job, they may need a new car to go along with that. Their lifestyle changes. The car is there to adapt or new things to move up into. You start extending your family, and they have something there for you. You're going to have their cars. You're going to need service for life. They're here to support you. So how can you tell the story of how your business aligns with those user needs and present that in a story, a rich, robust, multimedia way that drives your consumers through a path and gives them a reason and ability to connect with you? So that's a couple different pieces of technology. Where do we go next? Well, PWA and AMP. The term PWAMP has been thrown around a little bit at some Google conferences. It sounds pretty horrible, so I doubt we're going to see that going anywhere. But at the core, the technologies work really well together. So AMP isn't just a page. It's your content, ultra lightweight, ultra portable, can be used a bunch of different areas. PWA is a big shell that takes all of your content and makes it more of an app-like experience. So you build your AMP site, you add the PWA technology to it, and you have an incredibly lightweight, fast, engaging, interactive, multimedia, robust platform that you don't have to maintain in many different areas. You don't have to build an iOS app and an Android app and then maintain your desktop site and your mobile site. You have one core content base that you're using everywhere that all of your users can now interact with and see and gain access to everywhere. So as the marketer, your job is easier. You only have to maintain one code base and one content base. And you can ensure that all of your people and your customers that you're reaching are getting this dynamic, rich, similar experience no matter how they find or reach or engage with you. So what I want to leave you with is, yes, we call this session mobile on steroids. But it's important to think, steroids are a quick fix. And if that's all you hit, you usually end up in trouble. So change your ethos instead. Think mobile isn't something that you can now think about after you've done it. Keep mobile at the top of your list. And I know we've got that as sort of as points 1 and point 4. Rethink it from an engagement perspective, not a layout one, and also put it at the top of your list. Mobile is where you need to start and where you need to build your experience and where your consumers are going to be and live. So take that with them. And then points 2 and 3 are really all about leveraging whatever technology is there now so that you can really help ensure that your content reaches the right people at the right time. Because you all run businesses, run hotels, you have great stories, great content to tell. It's just a shame if you aren't able to use that and give that to your consumers. So use that technology, think that mobile-first initiative, and make sure that you're really out there reaching people when and how they need to be reached so that they'll keep coming back to you. And that's it for me.